We're recording. Just would like to say welcome. Thank you for joining us for our November Nature Night. I am Heidi Bach with the Columbia Land Conservancy. I'm the Conservation Education Manager. And we are so glad that you could all join us and are looking forward to hearing about snakes of our region. And for those of you who might not be familiar with us, we are a local nonprofit land trust, and we work with the community to conserve the farmland, forest, and wildlife habitat of Columbia County while strengthening connections between people and the land. And Nature Nights started for us in 2019, before the pandemic, and as a way for us to connect with folks in the colder months, we had invited different speakers to come to our office. And we did presentations and it was great. And then, you know, one silver lining of these times is Zoom. And we have been able to continue these talks throughout and still primarily through the colder months, and are grateful for our guest speakers for coming and telling us about things. So just a little background. Since our founding in 1986, the Columbia Land Conservancy has collaborated with landowners and partners to preserve the county's vibrant rural character. We have conserved more than 30,000 acres of farmland, forests, and wildlife habitat to ensure the clean air and water, healthy ecosystems, and a strong agricultural sector. And we work to cultivate connections to the land by providing opportunities like this, but also through our education and outreach programs at our conservation areas. We have 10 public conservation areas throughout the county that are open year-round from dawn till dusk. We offer a variety of programs at those sites, and we are, right now, we're doing less in-person programming and trying to do more of the virtual programming now that the weather's getting colder. And before we begin, I would just like to acknowledge that those of us here in Columbia County and parts of the Berkshires are on the ancestral homelands of the Mohican people. And they are the indigenous people of this land. And we would just like to recognize that despite tremendous hardships in being forced from here, their community now resides in Wisconsin and is known as the Stockbridge-Muncie community. And we pay honor and respect to their ancestors, past and present, as we commit to building a more inclusive and equitable space for all. Now, as I'd like to introduce our speaker this evening, Tom Tyning. We were just talking before everybody came on that we've known each other for a long time. It's been a while, but Tom was one of my professors in grad school, and it was the most fun class I ever took. And so I'd like to welcome Tom and introduce him all to you. Tom is a professor of environmental science at Berkshire Community College. He's been there since 1999. And prior to that, he was a field biologist and master naturalist for the Massachusetts Audubon Society and an adjunct professor in environmental studies at Antioch, New England, which is where I met him. He also worked for Springfield College and MCLA. He is an authority on New England natural history. His main interests are amphibians and reptiles. He is the author of A Guide to Amphibians and Reptiles, which is a great field guide. I hope I own it. And throughout the year, he conducts a variety of short and long-term field research projects on vernal pools, rare salamanders, Berkshire County butterfly populations, and endangered snake species in Western Massachusetts. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Tom, you can take it away. And Tom, what is your preference? Would you, if people have questions, would you like those in the chat or?
No, just bring them on.
Okay.
That's perfectly fine.
All right.
Can you see my screen here?
Yep.
Yep, that's on there for you?
Yeah, we're good.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Heidi and Jen. Nice to meet you as well. This presentation is heavy on the edge of New York and Massachusetts. And it's the edge because it's really fascinating. I grew up in the Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts, and moving out to the Berkshires was my big move west. That really got me far out. I should be wearing I'm sure I thought I was going to be wearing cowboy hats, but it's not that far west, but it is really cool. And I see that, was it you, Tracy, that's from Long Meadow? So yes, it's not very, that's the other direction. So you know the valley for sure. And then who was it way up in northern part of New York State? Somebody was here that mentioned it, but at any rate, it's a good area. This is a really spectacular. It's famous for all its historic material, for the arts that are here, but I have to say, I thought I knew a fair amount about herpetology, the study of amphibians and reptiles in the valley, but it's different here. And between the Hudson River and the Connecticut River is this really fabulous landscape that has a story to it and a history to it. So I'm going to try to tell you some of it, at least the parts that I know or think I know, or the parts that I think are really interesting that I wish I knew. And maybe some of you will pipe in. So feel free at any time if you have a question. If I don't see them, you can either raise your hand or just unmute yourself and scream. That's perfectly fine. It's what I'm used to in classes. Of course, that never happened at Antioch. Yeah, right. All right, so here we go. I'm going to give you some background here on the, oops, click on this, there, oops, sorry. To sort of dispel some myths, like the idea that there's, all snakes are alike, which they're really not. These on the left here are the major groups of snakes in the world, the boas and pythons, the colubrids, cobras and coral snakes, different from a big group, the sea snakes, much different from the vipers, adders, and pit vipers. And this is a really good introduction, or a good time to say that not all snakes are alike. It's sort of like people saying that all birds are alike. If you think that raptors are the same as hummingbirds, nobody thinks like that anymore. But still with snakes, we have a long way to go to teaching people about some basic stuff. Just look at the morphology. Yes, none of them have legs. They all have these beady eyes that they can't blink because they don't have eyelids. Yes, they've got those tongues sticking out at you. Yes, 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 yes. But they are really dramatically different. The middle picture up here in Anaconda is one that I've been taking students down to the Amazon for a number of years, and the Peruvian Amazon, and we've been really lucky enough to see wild snakes down there that are really incredible, including this fabulous Anaconda, one of the big giant constrictors, the coral snake here on the right as well. But then again, one of the smallest snakes lives right there near Long Meadow, Massachusetts, in the Connecticut Valley, and some parts of the Hudson Valley, this little thing called a worm snake. There are snakes found in lots of places, but they're different sizes, they're different girths, they're different behaviors. And so we're going to sort of look at that. When in the world, there's not a lot of fossil evidence on snakes. They're usually considered, when you find fossils, they look like, maybe some leaf that was in there, but there is some stuff here about 95, up to even 95 million years ago. The last dinosaurs, you may recall, and I'm almost old enough to be there, was about 65 million years. And so 95 million years with this one here on the right, this fossil snake, was right at almost not the beginning of dinosaur evolution, but certainly in the midst of the Mesozoic era. Snakes have been around a long time. Some have been, as I said, really massive. Some, like this picture on the right, actually was a good indication that snakes probably ate some dinosaur eggs, or even young animals. When they're small, they're a lot easier to deal with. And just in case you didn't know this modern human in this picture, there were no people around with dinosaurs. Let me make sure. So all of us that grew up with those weird cartoons, like the Flintstones, just ain't the case, sorry. But this is in here for size, for sure. Compsognathus, by the way, is a local northeastern dinosaur, Deinonychus, this one with the really nasty back claws, that was a local animal as well. So anyway, lots of cool things. But I digress. There is a couple of things to keep in mind for these snakes. And that is to say, just a couple of that, not that long ago, 10,000 years ago, we happen to have this freaking glacier that came down in the third or fourth wave of glaciation here in the world. And you can see on the left, the map got it down to basically stopping at Long Island Sound. It barfed up Cape Cod and puked up Long Island. That's what these things are, glacial upchuck. And that's about as far as it got down here. You'll notice over here that virtually all of New York State and virtually all of New England were encased in about 10,000 feet of ice. The Taconics, the Berkshires, were under 10,000 feet of ice. Greylock, Mount Greylock is only about, oh my God, 3,000 something 91 feet. 3 times higher than that was the ice sheets that were here. This is not a small thing. Lots of great evidence on that, but the point is there wasn't anything living here just 10,000 years ago. This was completely devoid. As soon as the glaciers began to melt back as conditions changed, the Native Americans did start moving in. They actually probably spent time within sight of glaciers, but it took a while for things to change. By the maximum of the Native Americans living here, and just as Europeans started to take over different parts of the world, this is a series of pictures that were that are part of dioramas at Yale University, Harvard University's research station out near the Quabbin Reservoir in central Massachusetts. These dioramas are designed to depict the same location in different periods of time in history, beginning with pre-European settlement. So this top left picture here is an example of what probably most of the Northeast's forests look like, much of the landscape. Yes, there were some natural areas that were not very forested, like some of the floodplains along the Hudson or the Housatonic River. But for the most part, forests were magnificent. That's the time of elms and oaks and chestnut trees. But also, as the landscape finally changed from all that successional change after the glaciers, it took several thousand years for forests to actually develop. So this time period is amazing, but more or less, we ended up by the 15 and 1600s and certainly into the 1700s, basically what we would call old growth forest. Our trees were not as big as sequoias, but there are still people, you probably already know some of them, and perhaps you've had them talk to you, that there are still trees here in the Northeast, down in the Catskills especially, but elsewhere as well, where there are small stands of the original forest that have not been cut, or only individual trees, species might have been taken out. There are 200, 300, and 400-year-old trees all throughout the Northeast here, and people have been mapping those in recent years. But by the time the Europeans got here, it did not take long for some of the earliest settlers from Europe to make New England look a lot like Old England. They started cutting the forest down, and these forests were cut first in small little farm stands where the distant mountains were left alone, but this was really all there was. One of the things that these new settlers were sold a bill of goods by saying the ground is wonderful, good for growing things. Except there's 100 billion tons of rocks that the glaciers burped up, and you got to move those out of the way. And most of you know that these stone walls are not just sitting on the surface. They actually are dug down 3 to 6 feet below the ground. Those are filled up, and then the rest of the rocks made the real fencing. By the mid 1700s, this is what a lot of New England looked like in the middle here. But by the mid 1800s, look at this magnificent, dramatic reduction of forest. In fact, at least 80% in some places of the Northeast, 90% of the forests were clear cut. Again, we made New England and the Northeast look like old England. That was what we did best. And this was really amazing. Now, I used to understand that it was mostly farming that did this, and that probably was the biggest thing. But here in the Berkshire Taconic area, iron factories cut down hundreds of thousands of trees every year to heat those rocks in order to make iron, and some of those iron works are now sort of being rebuilt so people can at least see some of the history that caused this remarkable stuff. Now, you all know already from more commonly known things like beavers and turkeys, when you cut all the forest species tend to disappear. There were very few woodpeckers left. There were very few warblers here. Those few little patches where there were forests left for either wood cutting or heating were the last refuges. Turkeys were completely wiped out. Beavers were completely wiped out by the mid-1800s. They didn't come back until the early 1920s or 30s by people bringing them back. Here in the Berkshires, beavers were brought back directly at an Audubon sanctuary in Lenox at Pleasant Valley. 3 of them were stolen from Western New York State, where they had just begun to come back. And they had built a giant chain link fence through the forest along a small brook and released the beavers. And the next day they were so worried that they'd lose the beavers that, oh my God, they made a dam outside the fence that they took 2 years to build. And so these clearly these animals are smarter than the rest of us. However, that was the first introduction. The second population was seen that same year in West Stockbridge, Massachusetts. Every beaver you see, and by the 1960s, it wasn't until the 60s, turkeys were brought back to Beartown State Forest in the Berkshires and released, and that was the first time that they actually succeeded in reproducing and were living. Virtually every turkey you see in your area and throughout the rest of New England came from those turkeys in southern Berkshire, as well as the beavers from central Berkshire. All of those were here. Well, somebody did something strange over in your part of the landscape. They dug a hole between Albany and Lake Erie and made this thing called the Erie Canal. And people said, this is stupid to farm here because this Midwest we hear has real soil, great place to grow, and farms were abandoned. Literally, people, as most of you have heard this, literally walked away from their farms. And in that period, from the late 1800s to today, the forest began to grow back. Some of those forests were again clear cut. White pines became really valuable by the early 1900s. They're an early successional species and were doing well. But today, if you can take a look here in the bottom right picture, a picture I took a couple of years ago from Bartholomew's Cobble, looking onto the Taconics, this is what we have today. We're back to about 80% reforested. It's not the same forest. Obviously, we've lost important trees like American elms and chestnut trees. Maybe they'll come back somebody else's lifetime, but probably not mine, but it would be nice. But we are back to being reforested. So what happens to all these animals? And in particular, what happens to little snakes? How in the hell did they get back into the Northeastern United States? Even with after the glaciers, it took several thousand years to really develop a forest. And little snakes like this milk snake can't do what birds can do. They can't be woodpeckers and fly hundreds of miles. They have to crawl on their belly like reptiles just to get somewhere. And the question is, how did these things south of the glaciers, and they had to be far south of the glaciers because there are animals that can't deal with long-term freezing conditions. How did they cross the Susquehanna River or the Hudson River or the Housatonic River or the Connecticut River? How did they master all of these places to get back here into the Northeast section of the world? Nobody has an answer to this. How in the world they did it. So how do snakes get around? Yes, crawling is what everybody knows about, and they're really kind of amazing. In fact, they move so fast, some people think the snakes can outrun you. They can't. They just look like they're going faster, but they can't do it. And so typically, they're usually on rough ground or in vegetated areas where they can really use their scales and these incredible muscles that are all up and down their bodies to get around. All snakes can swim, and they can do this really well. Garter snakes are very commonly in the water, but this is hard to tell, but this is a northern water snake, a common snake here that cruises in and out along the banks of rivers and especially lakes and ponds. This is all pollen from white pine trees nearby that are clogging up the edge here. But any snakes can swim. You can take a desert snake and put it in the water, don't do it, and they'll be able to swim without any trouble. Oops. There are a couple of snakes called flying snakes, just like we have flying squirrels. We know they don't fly, but they do widen out their body, and they actually can go many, many dozens of meters, flattening their body out and gliding just like our flying squirrels do. So movements are all over the place. Yeah, sorry.
I have a question about the flying snake.
Yeah.
You said we have flying snakes, like here?
Well, the planet Earth.
Okay,
I'm really
just
sorry.
wanted clarification.
Although if you've seen the reaction people have to some snakes when they're hiking, you might think that they're flying snakes, that they're coming after them. I apologize. Thank you for clearing that up. I'll get arrested. Snakes are found in their diversity is pretty impressive. About 10,000 species or so in the world, maybe a few less than that. Almost as many as there are birds, which, by the way, are reptiles. And it's time that every birder learned that reptiles include those with feathers. At any rate, you should hear me when I'm talking to the Hoffman Bird Club people. It's sometimes hilarious. Not always. So there are desert snakes, ocean snakes, mountain snakes, forest, meadows, rivers, all the places around here. So there's a garter snake at the top right swimming around. There's a rattlesnake down here on the edge of a little ledge. And so they can live almost anywhere. This is a big deal about the survival of snakes. And maybe this is what helped them get into the Northeast after years and decades, hundreds of years after the glaciers, maybe 1,000 years. So these are ectotherms. Do not call them cold-blooded, because if you actually, in fact, we are now measuring their body temperatures on a regular basis. When we're studying snakes with radiotelemetry and we are putting radios into their bodies, we actually are using radio transmitters that will beep, give us a signal, but they beep at the body temperature or a facsimile of the temperature of those animals. And we can download that information. We scribble it down, we put it into an Excel spreadsheet. We're going to send it to Jen and she can put it all down for us. And then we use some software and it will tell us the body temperature of the snake. They're almost never the temperature of the air. No matter what you have heard, it's because those early studies of ectotherms were done in captivity. If you've got a snake in a jar, you've got a snake in a cage, you get a light bulb on it or not, and you take a temperature of the cage and then the temperature of the snake, they're going to be pretty similar. In fact, they are pretty similar. But in the real world, snakes will come out in the morning and bask in the sun and very quickly bring their body temperature up. If they're showing up on a morning that's about 50 degrees and it's sunny, within an hour, their body temperature is in the 70s or 80s. And by the time it's midday, their body temperature is up about 100 degrees, not too far from ours. And if it gets too warm, they just go in the shade, take a swim, or do whatever they want to. At night, once it's cool, if it does cool down at night, their body temperature does drop, sometimes 10 or 20 degrees. And it doesn't bother them. If your temperature changes 3 or 4 degrees, you're not feeling well. 5 or 10 degrees, you're on the edge of death. And yet these animals, these ectotherms, can handle dramatic temperature swings, even though they don't really do it. So how much food do they get? Some snakes, it depends. Things like garter snakes eat probably every day or every 2 or 3 days. Bigger snakes like the rattlesnakes we've been following for a number of years probably only get 3 or 4 meals a year. And in some, like gravid female rattlesnakes, they probably only get 3 or 4 meals every 2 years, the years that they're going to give birth. It's a very, very dramatic difference in these things. So, there's three methods of getting meal: grab and swallow, that's the garter snakes. Constricting is often fun it's not fun, it's what it's there. And then venom is the third method that snakes have evolved to get food. So here's a water snake at the bottom left. It's grabbed a bullfrog and it's swallowing it down as hawks and owls do to their prey as well. They can make this incredible things without arms or legs, and all their teeth are tiny little things. Look at, they're all pointed backwards and they're really sharp. They're not chewing. They have to sort of walk their head over here, and they don't have a lot of options. So when they grab a food item, they basically can separate their jaws left and right and up and down as well, and then basically walk themselves around their prey and gulp it down. The vast majority of snakes eat live food, live prey, but they're known also, some snakes are also known to eat roadkills or dead animals that are there. So that's the grab and swallow. In snakes that are constrictors, these are always fun to watch one way or another. These are the snakes that most people get stupid cartoons and TVs about. The milk snake around here and the rat snake are the only two real constricting snakes we have in the Berkshire Taconic region. The idea of constricting is not for crushing their bones or doing anything. It's basically keeping the coils around their prey long enough that the amount of oxygen getting to the brain of the prey is reduced so much that the animal faints, holding on a little bit tighter and a little bit longer, and the animal dies. And then it's a lot easier to eat something that's not kicking and screaming and biting you. So constriction is a neat method of subduing your prey first so you can have a nice quiet meal. But the best way really of all this is just to be venomous. And that is two modified teeth in the front that we call fangs. And these two teeth have a duct that goes up through their very porous skull and to their saliva glands. And the saliva glands have been modified into having saliva that's a lot more potent than what you do to a French fry or a potato chip. Those start being digested in your mouth before they get to the rest of your digestive system, because that's what saliva does. This highly modified saliva can actually immobilize their potential prey, and it's really kind of spectacular. So the snakes that we have here, the only two venomous snakes in the Taconic Berkshire region, well, the only one really is the timber rattlesnake. You may have some copperheads down in the southern part of Columbia, but I can't honestly tell you, Heidi. You may know better than I do. A lot of people say they're all over the place. They're not. They're a very limited animal and also endangered. But these snakes that we have, these New World pit vipers, their fangs are so long that if they close their mouth, they go through their jaw. So they fold them back into the roof of their mouth, and they're actually mobile. So they don't even show up until the snake opens its mouth, and then the fangs can be protruded. And the whole idea is you give them a little quick bite, leave it alone, give it a few minutes, and it will succumb. And then you can go have a very nice meal. And the nice thing is that venom, modified salivary gland material, starts to digest the food from the inside of the prey while the outside is being digested by the rest of the snake's digestive system. So there's a reduction of the time it takes to digest your food. I keep hitting the wrong button here, sorry. Now, on the other hand, everything in the world eats a snake because they're easy to get down, and there is a huge number of various things down there. Of course, raptors are major predators. A buddy of mine who's always been afraid of snakes, but he's a big hawk watcher. For years and years, while he was hawk watching here in over in the Connecticut Valley, he would call me up gleefully and say, "Yeah, one of my hawks just went by with one of your snakes dangling from its talons." And I like hawks too, but oh my God, he was hilarious. Fish will eat snakes. I mean, there isn't hardly anything that won't eat a snake, even other snakes. Here on the right, by the way, when I took students a few years ago down to the Amazon, we caught a couple of snakes, these two snakes here. And when we brought them back in the same bag, there was only one snake in the bag. So we kind of squeezed this one and out came the other snake that was in it. And out of this snake came this snake that it had eaten. So snakes eat snakes too. It's just hell to be a snake, really. I don't know how they, at any rate, lots of things eat snakes. That's the other side of the story. Reproduction in snakes is variable. There is a lot of courtship behavior that is still being studied. It's not maybe as goofy as turkeys or grouse, but it's still pretty cool. And here on the right here are two copperheads, male copperheads that are in a combat dance, and they are basically vying for the female who was nearby. I saw her first, and then I kept noticing this thing sort of jutting out of the rocks and disappearing and jutting out and disappearing. And then finally, two of these males came out and intertwining and went through this very elaborate sort of combat dance that you see in a lot of male animals, stupidly, but it happens. And by the time they were finished, by the way, the female had disappeared and gone somewhere else. So that's what they get. At any rate, garter snakes, if you watch them in the late spring, females actually in many snakes leave a scent trail, sort of indicating their receptivity, and males will use that tongue, and that tongue is forked, and the tongue forking allows them to know which direction a scent trail is. It's a little more strong on this side versus this side. And so they follow it that way to track down the females, and they will stay with them for a while. Here's a bunch of, this is a single female water snake down here, much bigger than all the males, and several males trying to mate with her at the same time. It doesn't happen. If this isn't too, if it's too delicate, Heidi, just stop me. But male snakes have two things. They have a bifurcated sex organ called a hemipene. As far as we know, they only use one at a time. Nobody's ever seen anything different. They insert it into the cloaca of the female, and that insert it into the cloaca of the female, and sperm is transferred. All these snakes you're seeing in this picture here, by the way, are live bearing snakes. They have live young, but about half our snakes lay eggs. Here's a black rat snake baby poking out of its little egg here. And here is a timber rattlesnake over in the Taconics that is so filled with embryos that she's about to give birth any day now. Here's live birth in the rattlesnake and egg laying in rat snakes. I'll try to remember to tell you the other snakes that lay eggs and have live young when we get to the species. Snakes are a lot more fascinating when you really learn some of their survival skills and some of their evolutionary adaptations. Their chemosensory and tactile awareness is remarkable. That tongue picks up incredibly fine particles in the air of scent. They have perfectly good nostrils, but that tongue brings in more information. There's a special organ inside their mouth that analyzes that stuff. And even though they don't have able to blink their eyes, they don't have eyelashes or eyelids, they do have a clear scale over their eyes, so it's protected. But they have, in many snakes, a pretty good view of things. They have a pretty good sight. They hear poorly. They do have inner and middle ears, but no external ears. And there was one study 100 years ago that showed that a snake's brain was reacting when people were talking on the opposite side of the room, but nothing has been done since. We all still keep saying that snakes are deaf to airborne sounds, and yet they can pick up vibrations from the ground, but that says to me they probably can pick up vibrations from the air as well. I don't know, and we'll get maybe back to that in a bit. A lot of these things, if they can't escape, they have a strong defense. typically coiling if they can't run away, and sometimes fake biting, sometimes real biting. If they can run away, they will run as much as they can. And a lot of snakes are really cryptic and hard to see, and a lot of people say that's really good. And I mentioned thermal regulating earlier. They try to keep their body temperature even, just like we do, except they have to use external cues to do it, not just internal. So you may be lucky enough someday to run across a hognose snake over here, which has a really fabulous way of saying, leave me alone. They lift their front of their body up. They spread a hood like a little cobra. They're not mimicking cobras. You got to be on the same continent for that to happen. They will hiss. They will look like they're going to just kill you any chance they get. And they don't. These feed on almost nothing but toads, which are highly toxic, and yet these things can handle it. They do have enlarged rear teeth, and their saliva is enough to neutralize some of that toad toxins. And so there are a couple of reports of people being bitten by hognose snakes, which is hard to get them to do, but having a small reaction. If you look at Anne here on the right, we were out surveying snakes and found a couple of adult milk snakes who had no interest in being grabbed. And so that's what they did to her. And this is why I took the pictures and she was handling the snakes. This is how it works. We use students to do that. No, that's at any rate, they will do whatever they can to protect themselves. And oftentimes it's not enough. So let me take a breath here and tell you that I'm going to go through the snakes in this region fairly quickly, but please, again, if you have any questions or comments, or you want to correct me again, Heidi, please do.
Well, there was one question in the chat before about.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I think it's what constitutes a snake meal? And you just mentioned toads for the hognose snake, but.
So that depends also. Some, like many other animals, some snakes are generalists. They'll eat almost anything they can get down. Other snakes are really quite specialists, like the hognose. Some snakes will not feed on small prey. They'll only feed on certain size prey based on what they are. And this is really a very big unstudied area, because you might want to think about how in the world can young snakes survive in the same area the adult snakes are if they're going to be in competition. It's sort of like thinking about a red maple tree that produces 30,000 helicopters and they all fall down below that mother tree. Virtually none of them are going to survive because of the competition with the adult tree for food, nutrients, sunlight, and all that stuff. So there's competition for a lot of these things. Insects like butterflies have figured that out really well. Let's have our young feed entirely different things in different habitats, or think of dragonflies, for God's sakes. They're nymphs, the young are aquatic while the adults are flying in the air. Zero competition. But it's totally unstudied, as far as I know, in snakes. How is it that these young animals are actually surviving with the competition from the adults? So at any rate, most snakes, I'm going to say, are relatively generalists. So the garter snake, the most widespread snake in North America, a number of different species. We have the eastern or common garter snake here, feeds on anything it can get its lips around. And that is from salamanders to insects to slugs to frogs, and they will do just fine. And as abundant as they are, this picture down the front center, a friend of mine photographed in Westfield, Massachusetts. It just happened to be the only albino garter snake I've ever even heard of in the world, and how that hopefully, and maybe that survived, who knows at all. Garter snakes are by far the most abundant snakes. They've got a broken yellow stripe down their back, although if you look in this bottom left picture here, they can actually show a lot of spotting on them as well. They are very yellowish underneath, and they're in virtually every habitat. These are sort of the robins of the snake world. They have really taken to people's backyards, schoolyards, and they do fine, partly because of all those crickets that live underneath the drain pipes and the water spouts. All of you, I'm sure, have seen garter snakes. You can't have lived in the Northeast without seeing them. They're very early emerging snakes, and often in March. Certainly in mid-April, they're almost all out. And as Heidi suggested early on at the beginning here, I wouldn't be shocked at all if somebody saw garter snakes today crawling around. They are really tough animals with lots of really good adaptations for survival. But we have a second striped snake that is very, very similar. It's called the Eastern ribbon snake. And their stripe down the back is much more edgy and thin. It's not broken up. It's I like to think of these, for those who remember them, as a laser printer on the back, as opposed to a dot matrix printer on the back for the garter snake. Also, the side stripes on ribbon snakes are on scale rows 1, 2, 3, and 4, and on garter snakes they're on scale rows 2 and 3. I expect you all to remember that the next time you look for one of these, and don't worry about it. A little hard to tell, but if you look down here in front of the eyeball, there is a half moon white stripe, a half moon shaped white blotch in front of the eyeball. That is characteristic of ribbon snakes. These are often found in and near wetlands, as opposed to garter snakes, which are everywhere, including wetlands. Major eaters of small toads and frogs. Live bearers, both garter snakes. Those are the only two striped snakes we have. If you've got a striped snake, it's either a garter snake or a ribbon snake. The rest of these, the next group, are the solid colored snakes. And this is the smooth green snake. And I'm going to ask you guys to keep track, especially Jen and Heidi, who are helping do these coverboard studies. Everybody has the assumption, or the people I know in the field, that these are very common snakes and see them anywhere. In fact, we don't. A woman from Unity College who lives in the Berkshires 2 years ago did a survey by putting out 85 coverboards in 3 different major areas from central to southern Berkshire County. And these are all fields and meadows where green snakes tend to live. And she caught 540 snakes, and not one of them was a green snake. We are really beginning to think about maybe green snakes are going to have to be listed both in New York and Massachusetts, perhaps as rare or threatened species before too long. They're really, really neat animals. They're green. They're, for God's sakes. Oh, I'm really sorry. Herpetologists are not known for their dramatic naming of animals. There's no prothonotary warblers here. There's no chrysanthemums. There's no, it's the green snake because, oh, it's green. You'll hear more of this as we go by. They have prehensile tails. They feed apparently almost entirely on crickets and grasshoppers. Apparently, we don't know where they spend the winter, but probably in ant colonies. I'm just guessing, can't tell you for sure. They used to be considered common on Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. And I went out there and found one on a beach. I did not put this next to the scallops. That's where it was. I was kind of surprised, but very few have been seen in recent years. They lay eggs. And the weird thing is some green snake mamas hold on to their eggs until within days of the baby's hatching, while others lay their eggs weeks before they hatch. Nobody knows what's going on, but it's getting close to thinking about these may be on the cusp of live bearing snakes, even though they produce eggs. Very strange. Nobody's studying them yet. Solid color snake. What would you name a snake that had a bright red belly? Oh, about the red belly snake. And that's good because red bellies come in different colors. They can be really beautiful brown on the top. They can be sort of this grayish here, or this almost dark gray here, or this reddish color. But they all have a bright red belly to them, hence the name. These are not massive snakes. If you see one that's more than 10 or 12 inches long, you've got almost a world record. These are tiny snakes that probably feed mostly on ant larvae and possibly salamanders as well, if they can find them. Not much has been studied about these snakes. They're live bearers. They're very, really fascinating. Why the color morphs, what the percentage of color morphs on these, nobody's, to my knowledge, has studied that. But they do have live babies. Here's a female here that gave birth here at school a bunch of years ago, and all her babies were the same color morph that she was. So do these breed true for the color morphs? Do brown red bellies only mate with brown red bellies? Gray ones? Probably not. But nobody studied yet the genetics of these animals that I know of, at any rate. Be a fascinating thing if you have no life. So what about a snake that's all brown? Let's call it a brown snake. God. It used to be called the Decay Snake, and it's still in its Latin name for the New York City naturalist, Decay, who did some of the earliest research and studies and books about snakes in the Northeast. This snake is really kind of amazing. It can get up to about 1.5 feet long. They seem to be crepuscular. That is to say, they're active at dawn and dusk. These mostly are seen, if at all, they're again only 10 or 12 inches long, a very small snake. They have that sort of brownish stripe down their back. And so somebody will say, well, isn't that a striped snake? I guess you could argue that if you wanted to, but no. And they have really beautiful patterns on them, varying patterns and some slightly different colors, but they have just a tan belly, so you'll never confuse them with a red belly snake. They love slugs. What did they do before we brought slugs here? Virtually all the slugs in the Northeast are not native. They were brought over by Europeans. So what do they eat before slugs? Nobody knows. Oops. How about a snake that looks like a worm? Let's call it the worm snake. This is something that you've got over in the pine barrens of the Albany pine barrens. I've been over there with Al Breisch and his daughters, who were doing a neat little study on those, and green snakes there, by the way, which is kind of interesting. This is a snake not found on the hills around here. It's a oak, slightly pitch pine, certainly white pine forest, down lowlands, super sandy soil. When I lived near Long Meadow, I would find them in the Springfield area in a small spot. In the last 10 years, 0. And I've gone back with a number of field biologists, and we have just poured through these same areas where I used to find, if you look at this bottom picture here, here's green worm snakes and one brown snake in with them. And after a few days, the female worm snakes laid these eggs, which look like they're mimics of Good and Plenty candies. Why they're mimicking a candy, I don't know, but that's what they do. It's very strange, but really cool. And they hatch into tiny little, neat little baby worm snakes, which are only about 3 inches long. The biggest worm snakes, I think, are 10 inches. This is here in New York and New England. They're at the northern edge of their range on the planet Earth. These animals were probably the last snakes to get here after the glaciers, after the forest developed. And how they got this little dinky snake crossing all those rivers, I don't have a clue. They certainly can't climb over Alander Mountain. They would never survive that. So how did they ever get in and around all of these areas? People will tell me, of course, they had to follow river valleys. Well, that's nice. How'd they cross the freaking river one way or another? Love to know. The worm snake. Oh, what if you had a solid colored snake that had a ring around its neck? What would you, let's call it a ringneck snake. These are fairly common. They seem to be somewhat specialists on salamanders. I'm sorry, Heidi and Jen, your redback salamanders. There's our major food item for them. They almost certainly spend the winter in underground ant colonies. And people have actually found and done food habit studies of these and found a fair number of ant pupa in these. These are absolutely stunningly beautiful animals. You can't even get them to bite you. All right, somebody once was bitten by one 20 years ago, and that was it. The snake is fine. At any rate, I have to typically turn over lots of rocks before I actually find one of them. But I did find a couple this year on Greylock that one had a very orange belly and the other one had a very yellow belly. Their eggs are really goofy looking. They're irregular shaped and often curved or crescent shaped. And they nest in colonies so that all females they only lay 2 to 4 eggs each. And when I turned over some rocks in southern Berkshire County this midsummer, I found 26 eggs, all in one cluster. So at least a dozen females laid their eggs side by side under these rocks. Not the rocks next to them, just that particular rock. What's the big deal there? Couldn't tell you, except there were old eggs from last year and the year before. So it's clearly an important communal nesting site, but who knows much more about that. The first snake I ever saw in the wild was a baby ringneck snake caught in a spider web. And the spider had killed it and I'm sure, had fed on it. And that was the first time I ever saw one of these. It was really, so these are small snakes, small. Let's see, solid colored snakes. Oh yeah, the opposite extreme. We do have a couple of big snakes here. And I don't know if you run across them too often in your land conservancy areas in Columbia County, but this is one of the largest snakes you'll see and the quote unquote fastest, hence the name racer. Oh, they're so fast. They are not that fast. They can outrun you on a rocky slope or in leaf litter, but they're if you put them on a track that you'd beat them out. These are black racers, very neat snakes, very active early in the spring. This color is probably adaptation for being out early in the spring and late in the summer. They do eat other snakes on occasion. They've even been known to eat rattlesnakes, which is pretty uncommon, but they do. And they often winter inside the same dens that rattlesnakes do. These animals don't have to, but they have an early spring breeding season. They go through very big courtships. And if anybody ever says to you, they used to tell me, and I say, baloney, I was chased by a snake, I have to rethink my saying no, because these don't chase you. But when they get disturbed, especially in the breeding season in April and May, they are not running away. In fact, the males will stop, lift up their heads and look right at you. And some of these can lift up 3 feet off the ground. So they're looking right at your belly button and they are looking a little more impressive than almost any other snake we have. And they rarely will back down. So if you take a step towards them, they might crawl an inch or two towards you and you'll say, oh, the snake is chasing me. You're the one bothering the snake. Still, however, they are really different behaviors, but they lay eggs in late summer. They hatch in September. And look at what this bottom left picture is a baby black racer. They are heavily mottled and their camouflage is magnificent and they are really tough to see. These are one snakes. If you like to get bitten by snakes, these are happy to oblige. Whenever we have to do anything like measure these things, I let students catch them because they will bite the living daylights out of you. You're not going to die from it. And it's not much worse than picking blackberries and getting scratched, but it's startling. And so I'm not suggesting you go out and do it, but anyway, solid colored snakes, black racer. We're not done with solid colored snakes yet. So this is the largest snake, yeah, I guess we have in the Northeast. And this is a rare species. It's endangered here in Massachusetts, and it's threatened, I believe, in New York State, but I'm not quite sure about that. These are big constricting snakes. The racer just grabs and swallows. These are the big constricting snakes that we have, and they will grab certainly chipmunks, bunny rabbits, and probably squirrels, and get a meal out of it. They are surprisingly laid back. And so whenever we see these in the field and we microchip almost all of these rare snakes that we find here, at least on this side of the hills, the rat snakes are more or less pretty laid back snakes. You can just pick them up with your hands and they are very calmly moving around. We have a number of, see, 3 or 4 rat snakes in the Connecticut River Valley that have radio transmitters we implant inside their body cavity, and we've been tracking them for 2 years. Sometimes this is the most arboreal snake that we have. They can be up, in fact, sometime in July, we were hearing the snake and we're in some trees. We know they climb trees, blah, blah, blah. Finally, I saw it on a limb 45 feet up in the tree on a white pine, and it was basking on a dead branch. So these spend a lot of time in trees. Like the racer, this is a baby rat snake, incredibly heavily patterned. Their eggs don't hatch until September. So just a few weeks ago, really, they started hatching, and into October. How they survive and how they know where to go, we don't know. The adult rat snakes we have tracked to 3 different denning areas where they apparently go to the same wintering spots year after year and blah, blah, blah. But we don't have much more data on, we have no data on what baby snakes do. How they survive, it's just beyond us. But a beautiful snake, the black rat snake. Now, the pattern snakes here are the ones that I say will have these obvious patterns. They're not stripes, they're not solid color. Although if you look at this bottom left-hand picture, this is a young water snake here, and it looks almost solid colored. In fact, most water snakes we have are not this brilliantly colored like this big one up here, this big female. But they do have a pattern to them, and they're often easy to see. This is a not too distant relative of the garter snake and the ribbon snake. They are live-bearing snakes, rarely found too far from water, although when I was studying copperheads down in the Connecticut Valley, we had water snakes that would crawl up to their dens up on rocky hillsides, quite a distance from water. So they can go quite a distance away, although mostly they're in water, hence the name water snake. Ay, ay, ay. Perhaps the most commonly seen of all the pattern snakes is this, the milk snake. Has a weird name. Some of you probably know why, because those early colonial days, those strange little Europeans that came over here who grew cows and sheep claimed that these snakes hanging around the barns would glom on to the milking parts of a cow and drink its milk. I actually met a guy once who told me he watched a milk snake crawl out into a field, wrap its body around the 4 legs of a cow so it couldn't run, and then glom on to the udders and drink milk. I don't know what he was on, but that snake would have to have been about 14 feet long, and there is no animal on earth that's going to sit still when those giant, not giant, but really sharp pointy teeth glom onto the soft parts. It ain't going to happen. But they're called milk snakes even today, and I don't know why we haven't changed it. We should probably do that. Beautiful patterns here, commonly mistaken for copperheads. The Berkshire Eagle had a picture 3 years ago. Somebody said, oh, we saw a copperhead here, and sent a picture to the paper, and they printed it and said copperhead. And I sent them a little note saying, no, that's not. But by the time they put the retraction in, it was too late. Everybody had seen the first pictures. Take a look at the head of this milk snake. Can you see there's sort of a patterns of light and dark patterns on here? They almost look like little faces, but they're quite variable. So they're the way to really tell these apart is that copperheads are called copperheads. You'll see in a moment, because they have solid coppery colored heads. They don't have any patterns on there. Now, it doesn't mean, and really amazing to sort of get people excited, milk snakes, when they're scared and can't get away, they vibrate their tails. And if they do it in leaf litter, it sounds like a rattlesnake. Is this auditory mimicry? No, because a lot of snakes in Europe vibrate their tails that are non-venomous, and there's no rattlesnakes anywhere else except the New World. They're not mimicking venomous snakes. It's possible that rattling attracts potential predators to their tail end. And I'll bet some of you have seen snakes with blunted tails where a predator has bitten them. It could be that they were scurrying away and they grabbed the tail end, or maybe that rattling of the tail invites biting at that end, sort of like the eye spots on some of the big moths and butterflies. So that's very possible that that's there. But I have to say, not a lot of work done on that. So here's copperhead pictures. Here's 2 copperheads on the right, milk snake down on the bottom, top left and right. So notice the solid coppery colored head of a copperhead. There's no markings up there, and that's standard. Also, milk snakes are basically gray snakes with reddish brown saddles. Copperheads are reddish snakes with reddish brown saddles. Their basic color is quite different. So hopefully that might help you. So they are really quite beautiful, but milk snakes are not copperheads. And luckily, the last snake to talk to you about today is the timber rattlesnake. And as Heidi indicated, this is what I've been spending a lot of time with, only because they are the most vilified and rarest vertebrate in the Northeast United States. It is rarer than bats, rarer than most anything that you can think of. These are really uncommon, partly because up until the 1960s, we actually paid people to go out and kill these things. The New York State, Vermont, Massachusetts, all the Northeastern states had bounties on these snakes, and you could make money from the mid 1800s on up into the 1960s to kill these things. You'll notice that these are in different colors. There's Anne again. She's further away than you might think in this picture. These are two snakes in the Taconics heading back to their winter dens. So this is sometime in early October, as I recall. They can be very dark, they can be very light, but they all have these rattles, a unique structure. No other animals in the world, no other snakes in the world have anything like this. These are all loose little segments that interlock. There are incredible muscles in the base of the tail, the tip of the tail of these snakes, that can shake and contract more than any other muscles in the animal kingdom. I've had to move snakes back to the lab and picked one up, and they weren't happy, and I'd put them in my bag and they'd be rattling as soon as I picked them up. They rattled the whole time I was hiking down the mountain. They rattled all the time I was in the car driving back to the lab, finally rattling while I took them back out of the car and released them into the lab. And these animals, this thing was rattling for an hour and a half to 2 hours nonstop. Try to do anything with any muscles you have other than your lungs coming in and out. It's remarkable. So these are animals that are endangered. They are not what anyone would call aggressive. If you stay on trails, you're guaranteed to see one if there's one in the trail. The snakes don't stay in trails. Of course, they're all over the place. There are plenty of people now making illegal trails through lots of landscapes, people letting their dogs run loose, and it's just a tough problem. 100 years ago, when GPS and GIS were just beginning, I used to have to bring my laptops out and plug it into a GPS unit and wait for 20 minutes to a half an hour for a signal to appear there. Now you can drive with them in your car without any trouble. And so I left this little laptop running, and I came back 20 minutes later, and here's a baby rattlesnake, a 2-year-old, that had found that laptop was really warm. And this was in early October, and it just said, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you." The den is right behind the here, so it was on its way, but said, "Oh, I think I'll sit here for a long time." So I had I didn't wait for it to leave because it wasn't going to, so I had to move it back into its den, and it disappeared underground. So after I put a microchip in it, as a matter of fact. So rattlesnakes are not the danger they think of. There's only been 2 or 3 rattlesnakes, 2 or 3 bites in the last 100 years. In fact, literally last 100 years. 2 of those bites I was present at. And that is, I don't tell that to students because then they wouldn't come out with me, but it is kind of a interesting statistic. There's only ever been 2 deaths in New England, one in Copake Falls, about 1850, and the other one in Wilbraham, Massachusetts, in the Connecticut Valley, about 1865. And those are the only 2 deaths in the Northeast known in the last 150 to 200 years. So these are not dangerous things. There are people who get rattlesnakes in their yard. This woman here calls me and other people every year, another guy every year, to get the rattlesnakes out of her yard. But this year, she had a couple of rattlesnakes. I went down there and she said, "Oh, be careful when you walk over here because there's a rattlesnake we've been watching. It sleeps under this rock every night and comes out and coils up next to the bird feeder." Think chipmunk. Major item for rattlesnakes. And she said it sits there all day and then it goes back on it. She says, we're kind of liking this snake. We kind of like watching it. And I'm thinking, this is a woman who, she never wanted to kill them, but she didn't want them in her yard. Unfortunately, she's on a pathway that gets them every year, but they're changing their attitudes. This is a snake you can't see, a rattlesnake you can't see. Its rattle only had a couple of segments anyway, and a brand new transmitter. We're now putting them on their rattles instead of internally. And this particular unit can also get signals from satellites, and it records GPS locations of the snake X number of hours or days whenever we set it. And this is going to be sort of our newest maneuvering to really learn best about snakes, their habitats, their habitat use, their movements, and things that we know so much about other animals, but still relatively little about these, the most endangered organisms, vertebrates that we have in the Northeast. And you may not like snakes or you may love them. Either way, leaving them alone is really what is needed. We have to handle them a little bit just to get this equipment on them so we can learn more. But I have to tell you, I much prefer sitting down with my notebook, seeing a snake and writing down all the notes that I can and just watching it. And oftentimes they just sit there. My kind of life. I kind of like it a lot. And that's all I have, Heidi. I hope it didn't put you to sleep too badly, but I will stop sharing my screen here and see if anybody has any questions or stories or want to correct anything I say, or tell me something about your snakes. I would like to hear more about those.
Yeah,
Tracy, go ahead. Yeah,
I have probably the stupid question.
Rattles.
The rattle itself, does that constitute every year? Does it grow yearly?
Great question. No, it's every time they shed their skin.
Oh, okay. And
so
how often do
young
they do
snakes
that?
shed more often than older snakes, but there's a guy in West Virginia who's clearly got no life, who has been studying rattlesnakes for 60 or 70 years. And he has worked out a number of things. If I hadn't done that, if you look at a rattlesnake's rattle, all the rattle segment, they can be, the sides of the rattles can be parallel, or they can be narrowing. When they're first born, of course, they have a little tiny fake rattle called a button, but they shed within 2 weeks of being born alive, and they get their first real segment, but they're small because they're dinky little snakes. The next time they shed, they're a little bit bigger. The snakes are a little bigger, and the rattles are a little bigger. And up to about 6 to 8 years, maybe 10 years, you can actually see this narrowing of the rattle segments on a rattlesnake. Now, these break off all the time. So sometimes you don't, as you saw in that last very short rattled snake with a transmitter on it. But if you see a rattlesnake that's got all parallel, sides are parallel of the rattle, it's likely a minimum of 10 to 15 years old. And it could be older than that. And now in upstate New York, one of the longtime researchers, Bill Brown up there, who's done more for rattlesnake research than anybody in the Northeast, he's actually been marking snakes for a zillion years and has two of them that are now over 40 years old in the wild. So these are long-lived animals. These are, what's a white-tailed deer live? If you find a 6 or 7 year old deer, they're probably toothless. They're really hurting. 10-year-old deer are almost unheard of. So these are long-lived animals. These are in the range of big raptors, like some of the big hawks and owls, bald eagles. So these are long-term predators. Now, they eat almost entirely small mammals like chipmunks and other small mammals. They can get mice as well. And it's been kind of fascinating to see if there's going to be any changes. The huge numbers we have of chipmunks every 3 to 5 years based on the acorn crop, which is based partly on, believe it or not, sunspot activity, a 10 to 12 year cycle. All of these things come into play when we're talking about top predators in forests. And so you think of rattlesnakes in particular, like hawks in forests and owls, or maybe other top predators in other kinds of ecological communities. They're affected by this, but the snakes don't have to eat every day. And as I said, rattlesnakes, if they eat more than 3 or 4 chipmunks a year, they're doing fine, perfectly fine. It's incredible. They probably eat more than that, but who knows?
Thank you.
Other questions? I do have a question about the rattlesnake with the transmitter. So how does that impact their rattle ability?
In that one, it can't rattle. It couldn't rattle anyway. There's only a couple of segments on it. But when we have a long rattle, left it at my other desk. When we have a long rattle, we can put it sort of towards the base, and they can still shake it. And so that do it. But they will lose segments regularly. In fact, we occasionally find rattles that are broken off on the ground when we're going out there. So we're not sure, who knows? Maybe it does affect them badly, but I probably not. Far as we know, it's a warning for predators that are after them, not for attracting prey, far as we know. Could be. So, cool.
Other questions or comments?
Thank God. It's better than students.
Oh.
No question. Really interesting.
Yes.
Video. Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Thanks for staying awake. I appreciate
No, we
it.
enjoyed it.
Question,
We
question.
Where do you live, Lynn and Michael?
we're back at right now, but then we'll be in Virginia. So we're
That's a close call.
Yeah.
I get calls from people in Beckett all the time with copperheads and rattlesnakes. There are none in Beckett. I don't know how to break that to you. Zero.
We haven't seen any here, but 3 years ago when we went back to our house in Virginia, which nobody had been in all summer, there I have got pictures. I think it was about a 7 or 8 foot. I think it was a rat snake, and we've seen them. I think we watched them mate in our yard. We're on the water that goes out like towards the Chesapeake Bay. James
Nice.
Everett. Yeah, I think, but we have not seen any snakes on our property in Beckett.
Yes,
Well, you'll have some. You'll have the common snakes like ringnecks and milk snakes and things. But the rat snakes are a common snake everywhere else in the country. They're on
Okay.
the northern edge of their existence on the planet Earth here in the Northeast.
I will tell you, since that snake was in our house, and it could be, we have crawl space under our house. I don't know where it's been living the last 3 years, but since we saw that snake, we have not had any mice in the house, and we're in the country. I think that snake is still in the house somewhere, and it's probably had his free run of the house the last 6 months.
It's
So I'm not
wildly
expecting-
possible.
Yeah,
It's
I'm not
wildly possible, but
expecting mice,
they don't really find enough stuff to deal with in a house. So they probably are nearby
No.
though, but come visit from time to time.
I do want to correct one thing. I have seen garter snakes galore up here
Oh,
all summer, but I have not seen a chipmunk all summer. This is very rare.
This,
Go
yeah.
ahead. Somebody's going to finish. Some years the chipmunks populations are really big in different areas. So this year in the Connecticut River Valley, chipmunks are everywhere. 3 years ago in the Berkshires, they were everywhere. And then 2 years later, last year, they were really low numbers. So it fluctuates. And part of it is all about, I think as Heidi would agree, is the mast crop, the acorns and the beech nuts and all of the other seed producing trees. And these animals go up and down. And there's probably competition, believe it or not, between deer, white-tailed deer, and chipmunks. I mean, both eat a lot of seeds and acorns, including acorns. And so deer populations in Beckett are out of sight. And it's possible that they are also depressing forest growth. And so this is a big issue Mass Wildlife and New York DEC has to deal with, is the incredible, we manage the forests in the Northeast, in fact, most of Eastern North America, for white-tailed deer. All the cutting you see and all the logging thing is to make sure white-tailed deer are common and abundant. It's the most valuable, financially valuable animal in America. And so populations are higher now than they ever have been. Native Americans never saw deer concentrations like we have today.
Why is that? Why are you saying
Because they
that?
make so much money.
Well, no, why do they make so much money?
Hunters they have to pay money to fish and game agencies to manage the herds. And so they are exceedingly valuable. And of course, they're a big game animal. And so they're very attractive. Not to mention, oh, by the way, the food is really good. And that's really why most people hunt. I'm a non-hunter for sure, but the food is really good. And so deer were not protected until about 1900. And their numbers were really low. And that they were one of the first animals to get a management program. But that management program also included financial rewards to state agencies to manage forests and therefore these animals. So they're really important.
What can be done where we live in Virginia was all country and lots of woods and lots of deer. And they have in the last 2 years put up, I want to say thousands of apartments. I mean, there are all sorts of complaints. Nobody can believe the city has let them do that. And this before we left was the first time we had ever had deer in our yard eating our flowers. Yeah. Eating everything, because they no longer, I mean, I think it's just terrible. They have taken up so much woodlands that the deer would normally be in, and they've built these horrible apartments.
Well, that's a question that I'm sure the Land Conservancy can help you with, at least ideas, because that's what everybody here in the Northeast is dealing with as well. As urban sprawls, we have less and less landscape. And so you don't have to always protect 10,000 acres at a time. A few acres at a time is often good enough, but there's still problems with even that. And so there's no easy answer to that, Lynn, as you probably already know.
And I'm saying that they've built all these condominiums or whatever, the apartments, townhouse, and they're, I guess, at least 15 miles from us, but that has they've taken over this other land that's making, I guess, more deer come in our direction, which, we'll see 25 of them on the road right before our road, which is a dirt road.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that is an issue, and we don't have time to deal with it right now, but it's something that you should talk to some of the conservation groups down in West Virginia, and there are some.
Virginia, I'm gonna put you on them.
Well, I was gonna say,
put Heidi on them.
Yeah, I will. I can send you some resources of how to find what your local land conservancy down there might be, and it might be a good opportunity to reach out to them, because and like Tom said, it's a challenge we're having up here. I think it's a little bit slower progress, luckily for us, and we've had an opportunity to, talk to the municipalities and stuff like that.
Well, you've done a good job.
Oh, well, thank you.
That's why we're here. Thank you.
Right. Smooth.
Smart people.
Yeah.
I want to say, one of us is very depressed about going back to Virginia.
Oh.
Well, you're gonna miss all the snow, so don't feel that bad.
We'll come back for that. We've been known
All
to
right, good.
check that.
All right. Anything else, Heidi?
Well, we're coming up on our time, and I just wanted to again thank you, Tom, and thank everyone for joining us. And this is a monthly series, so December we have a December 16th. We will be joined by Rosemary Moscow, who is a author and science cartoonist, and she actually just recently wrote a book about pigeons. It's called Pigeon Watching. And so she will be talking about her research and discussing the secret history of pigeons and why they're so important. So, yeah, so if you, I'm not sure if you've signed up for the whole series when you signed up for this one, but we will send an email out early next week with this link to the recording and some of the, some resources that Tom shared with us. So again, thank you all, and have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good job.
Thank you.